Let's get to the footy. Collingwood are the talk of the town. Is it an aberration or is it a real problem, Kane and Matthew? Let's take a look at what's happened here, Lordo, as the drop-off for the Pies in the last 2 rounds.
Well, there's not scoring. They're obviously conceding more points. They've dropped off in their pressure, and then there's issues everywhere, really. And I know it's only for a couple of weeks, but I heard Craig McRae, Kane, even say he saw a moment where Hawthorn celebrated a defensive act. And he said that's what we've been doing for most of the year, but probably insinuated that that's not quite what we're doing currently. So just dropped off slightly in the last couple of weeks. Do
you think the three-quarter time comebacks have wallpapered over some cracks? I think they're 12 and 8 to three-quarter time, so that's not too bad. But do you think some of those comebacks, the Port Adelaide game springs to mind?
No doubt. I think sometimes, I remember I touched on one where I'd treat that like a loss because if you lose by 2 points, you go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. They just keep winning them, so they've looked past some things. But it's probably not the worst thing for them, Kane, to get this wake-up call heading to the finals.
And the big story was that Nick Daicos will be out for, they're saying, 6 weeks, Caro. Let's have a listen when he spoke to the media today.
Yeah, I think I might have had some bone bruising initially, which stemmed back to the Port Adelaide game. I was a little bit sore then, and first quarter I sort of got on my knees to get a ground ball, and when I got up I felt it, and then third quarter I think I sort of smashed it out of the smithereens.
We wish him well. The season's going to miss him. Hindsight's wonderful, but saw against Port. We saw Ashcroft play every game and go down. Are we expecting too much of the superstar young players and not resting them at all?
Yeah, you've been big on this, Hutchie.
Ashcroft did his knee. I mean,
so it's hard to know when...
being tired, fatigue? I mean, surely that's just a dreadful accident.
When do you rest them and how do you know when to rest them?
They're just too good to rest those players, and clubs get a bit selfish about playing them. And I just wonder whether there's... particularly look at Nick there, with that soreness clearly wasn't irrelevant to his injury on the weekend.
Yeah, so should he have been rested after the Port game?
Well, somewhere. I just wonder whether we asked too much of them.
Yeah, and we've got to now look at the midfield, and that's the question mark around them. Are they one-paced? Heard you with Nathan Buckley this morning, Kane, he used the word one-paced. And where did we differ, Kane? I know you think De Goey should go forward. I think they're lost now without him in the midfield. With no Daicos, I think they need to get Jack Crisp in there, Jordan De Goey, and then just have the sort of the slower type midfielders, 2 of those in around. But unless they get speed in there, I'm not sure they're going to match some other midfielders.
Yeah, I think they've got more options in the midfield. I think their issue is with their forward line, Lordo, and I just look at the way that Melbourne have changed their season, the whole course of their season, by moving Petrarca forward, and there's the difference between De Goey's time and Petrarca in the last month or so. I think the Petrarca role needs to be played by De Goey to sort out their forward line problems. McStay's not a goal scorer, he's a 1-goal-a-game player. Mychek, not a heavy goal scorer. If you shut down Elliott, what else is it in the forward line?
Johnson's been a bit off, Cox is out.
Yeah, all of that. So I think De Goey could be a real wild card for them. 70-30 is where I'd play him, and then you can inject Sidebottom and Crisp and others through the midfield. You've got a few more options.
It is interesting, their forward situation. Like, Elliott's had some very big games. Justin Lepich, even when they were flying back in early July, foreshadowed that was perhaps the area they were worried about.
Oh, we're the best defensive team in the comp, so I don't know about that. I've always thought that the times where we've struggled is we haven't been able to put the maximum amount of scoreboard pressure on the opposition. They've been able to stifle us and our scoring power and bring the game to a little... Go back to the Melbourne game, for an example. I think both teams scored around 60-odd. It wasn't as much the defence, it was as much as our inability to score.
And Hutchie, this is what they felt cost them in last year's final series too, that they couldn't score for all the work they do. And this year, 34 goals, 31. And of those players, Elliott's the only one in form.
So you think it's more system, more so than personnel?
Well, you'd love it. There's no Tom Hawkins, there's no Tom Lynch, there's no superstar down there. But, they believe they just don't get enough bang for buck for the entrance they get in there.
And it's really interesting whether we will consider adapting to coach against the opposition a little bit more, because they've been so much belief in themselves, the way they play. Sicily was a good example. Yeah. The teams that have gone around Sicily or tried to curtail him have had some results. They didn't seem like that was part of their mode on the weekend.
And they've had great success doing that, where they haven't, you're just worried about themselves more than the opposition. But I'm just wondering, Caro, is it that this is psychology of when you're so far on top of the ladder and you've got top spot, versus problems? I'm not sure what it is. They have got some problems, but I think they'll bounce back still pretty hard.
I think this is a really good time to have found out the problems. And with respect to all the Hawthorn supporters watching, can we just mention what they did? Because that was an extraordinary performance. And this caught my ear. It was actually a couple of weeks ago. Will Day, one of their young leaders on SEN, Craig.
I think we've done a really good job of breaking down the hierarchy, and I reckon when I first got to the club, there was a bit of that hierarchy around the club, so it's been nice. The last few years, we've broken that right down, which Sam's been driving that really heavily, which has been awesome.
So Sam Mitchell, even when he was playing and witnessing the leadership group in the last years, and even in the great last years, before it all started to fall apart for Hawthorn when they all got old and left, I think felt that the leadership structure was disproportionate, and he wanted to flatten it out. He's come in there. He's got Ray McLean's gone. He left last year, the leading teams model. And the younger players made it clear that they all wanted to have a bigger say and that they were feeling shut out and had for some years. And it doesn't take away from James Sicily, who is one of the great captains this year. He won't be All-Australian captain, but he'll be in the All-Australian team.
Will Day's been awesome. And Sicily, just the numbers on Sicily, and we saw 37 touches on the weekend. Look at that when they win and don't, Lordo and Kane. So, and you saw the difference in the two St Kilda games when Sicily had a great game versus a not so good game. So teams need to go to work on him.
Yeah, so that's to speak about taking away the opposition's biggest strength, and I wouldn't suspect James Sicily is standing all alone like he was allowed to against Collingwood on the weekend. Just on Sam Mitchell, he's the most exciting young coaching prospect that I've seen in a long time. I think he's brave enough to do things that other coaches aren't doing, and to actually be the only team that's got a dedicated tagger. I know that's a small thing, but the role that that's having in McGuinness on Daicos again, he's bucking the trend with that, and he's not afraid to do things differently. Saw him give an almighty quarter-time spray last week against the Saints. Coaches are hesitant to do that in the modern world. He's not. So just watch out. I know I've said it a couple of times, but couldn't be any more impressed with what he's doing.
Dug his own tunnel, and you can already see the light at the end of it. And that's despite the ex-president still making waves, Cara.
Look, what a pity when so much is going well on the field. And I know they've had some terrible losses this year, but they've surpassed all our expectations, certainly mine, that Jeff Kennett can't let go. He's writing letters to the board, urging them to make decisions about Dingley or to stick to their guns about Dingley, causing trouble behind the scenes. I don't understand why he's doing it. Speaking to the media about other stories involving the Hawthorn Football Club. I think it's sad that he can't let go. It's sad that he's feeling so irrelevant that he needs to have a go at other clubs like he did at Mark Evans a few weeks ago.
There?
Well, there's a board. There might be a board shake-up at the end of the year at the AGM because there are 3 positions that may be recontested. Andrew Gowes has just got to be really strong. They've got to choose a new CEO and they've got to do it soon. And people are being advised that Hawthorn is not united because of Jeff in the background, and people are being put off even going for that role. So it's a real pity that he can't. He's lost the election, or his man lost the election.
It's time for Andrew to stand up as well, though, isn't it? To your point, at the moment, wrongly, Jeff sounds more like the leader of Hawthorn than Andrew Gowes does because of the volume of things he has to say. As often as he does, as often as many people disagree with him, he's...
Andrew certainly has a different style.
Yeah, he does, but maybe it's time to adapt that just a little bit.